morning, Norwich. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me. I am humbled to speak on this special day to this wonderful community. As mentioned, my name is John Sheldon. I am a retired sergeant major with just short of 22 years of service. Many of you have seen me around town and know me as the manager of our Curtis Lumber team located on Hale Street. Today is a very special day. Today is Veterans Day. Do any of you wonder why we celebrate Veterans Day on November 11th? Today is the 100th anniversary of the signing of the armistice, which ended World War I and ended the hostilities between our allied nations and Germany. The armistice was signed on the 11th month of the year, the 11th day of the month, and the 11th hour of the day. When this armistice was signed, an eerie silence crept across the battlefields, and 4 years of unbelievable destruction all of a sudden came to an end. There were 320,000 military members that were killed or wounded in World War I. During World War I, many of our military members were operating under poor conditions, like marching mile after mile in knee-deep snow with just one pair of boots. Severe frostbite and death during these marches alone was widespread. Many walked until they could walk no farther because their feet or hands were frozen solid. How do we begin to pay our veterans back for operating under conditions similar to this? During the history of all of our deployed conflicts, we have similar stories about our military members working under severe duress, extreme weather conditions, and using equipment that sometimes malfunctions because it was awarded to the lowest bidder. Yet, all of our veterans, they continued with their mission with a never-quit attitude. On this Veterans Day, we must reach out and thank our veterans for the sacrifices that they have made to preserve our country's freedoms. We know we can never repay the debt we owe to our veterans, but we must try. We can start to repay this debt by remembering what the veterans have experienced and the challenges that they've had to overcome. We must remember. We must remember that a veteran is someone who wrote a blank check made payable to the United States of America for an amount that included their life. Our country held on to this blank check until that serviceman or servicewoman received a command from higher headquarters of carry on. It's hard to put a price on what we owe our veterans, but how about we start out with a small thank you? When you stop and think about it, what do you think motivated a veteran to volunteer for one of our branches? Many of you standing in front of us today, you served in one of these branches. For that, our nation salutes you. As we look around us today, what do we all see? I'll tell you what we see. We see freedom. Our nation owes you a special gratitude and thanks for that freedom. Today, we have 1.4 million people serving in a combination of our military branches. That equates to only about 0.5% of our nation's total population. Shenango County's population is roughly 50,000 people. What percent of our county's population do you think is currently serving? An unbelievable 6% of this county's population is serving in one of our branches. That's 12 times the national average. What do you think drives our sons and daughters to serve this great nation? Do you think it's a sense of duty that they feel? What is this thing, this sense of duty thing? What do you think tugs at a person until he or she says, send me? It's a fact that when that tug tugs on you, it doesn't matter what tax bracket you're in. Your patriotic duty takes over. We've all felt that tug. We've all felt that need to serve for duty, honor, country. Because of you veterans, our United States of America is a beautiful place. We can thank the great veterans standing before us today that we are able to walk down our local streets without fear of car bombs or living with a constant fear of vicious monsters hurting us. Have you noticed that the world is changing? The world is changing every day. All you have to do is watch the 6 o'clock news to see what I am talking about. The news is full of gutless terrorism. I think no more of these monsters than I would of gum stuck to the bottom of my shoe. These bottom feeders, they fight us. They fight us from unsuspecting dark shadows. The only mission in life these terrorists have is to kill as many of us as possible. These terrorists do this by using methods such as driving vehicles onto crowded sidewalks, blowing up unsuspected buildings, firing up unsuspected places of worship, or by any other unconventional means that they can dream up. Many of these bottom feeders that I'm referring to, they've pledged their allegiance to terrorist groups such as ISIS. But lately, attacks on Americans are just as likely to be done by internal homegrown murderers. Look no further than the Jewish synagogue 2 weeks ago, which killed 11 people while they were quietly worshiping in Pittsburgh. Or how about 5 days ago at the Borderline Bar and Grill, where a massacre took place in which 12 people were murdered while listening to their favorite band in Thousand Oaks, California. I won't intentionally mention the names of these people because I believe these monsters commit these vicious acts for the recognition that they receive. These evil animals, they stalk and attack places that are unarmed and unprotected. They never commit these devilish acts where they might find resistance. They always focus on location where flocks of sheep, they're unsuspecting and vulnerable. Internal and external terrorism, it's alive and well. We mustn't be complacent. It's likely just a matter of time before these terroristic individuals, they figure out our local security and they start attacking us with regularity on the very ground that you're standing on. You know what our enemies don't understand? Our enemies don't understand why America is willing to do what we do. Our enemies don't understand why Americans fight for what we fight for. Our enemies don't understand why our nation fights because of what our nation believes in. Our nation fights not because we think war is a good thing. Our nation fights because war is sometimes necessary. Americans fight and die not for the glory of war. Americans fight and die for the prize that Americans call freedom. As I speak today, we have 150,000 troops deployed around the world. These military members are deployed away from their families and friends. These military members are sometimes scared, and many are in harm's way. Anyone who has been to combat and says they weren't scared at some point, it's likely that they're not telling you the truth. I have been deployed many times in my 22 years. I'm not ashamed to say that there were times that I was scared. Being away from home in a strange country, thousands of miles away from your loved ones, and not knowing what lurks in the darkness ahead of you, that can be scary. I used to minimize my stress and fear by reading passages from a little worn Bible given to me by my grandmother, Marion Sheldon. The scripture that I would often read that comforted me was Psalms 22, verse 4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. I got through each day by saying that verse and knowing that I could always count on my fellow brothers and sisters for their unconditional loyalty to our unit and cause. Today our military veterans come from all walks of life. Some come from poor families, some come from rich families, it doesn't matter. Some people even think that many veterans were born with a magnetic, patriotic pull. Some think that this patriotic pull is part of our DNA. Are any of you able to identify a veteran in a crowd? You know, I think I am. When I see a veteran walking down the street, generally they're swinging their arms 9 to the front and 6 to the rear. Veterans tend to keep their haircut and mustache trimmed to AR 670-1 standards. Veterans address people as sir or ma'am. Veterans are always 15 minutes early to any appointment or event. And veterans, they eat twice as fast as anybody else in the restaurant. I'm usually done with my meal before my wife gets done with her salad. I try to consciously eat slower. It never works. As I look out this morning, I see all you veterans standing in front of me. I want to let you know, you are my family. It was truly an honor to serve with you while protecting our country and flag. Speaking of our American flag is truly a thing of beauty. Our flag represents our country's accomplishments. These accomplishments are expressed in her red, white, and blue. Our American flag represents the blood, sweat, and tears that many people before us have sacrificed to keep our America free. Our American flag has been carried in every American battle since the Revolutionary War. Our American flag is a symbol of all that is good about this great country. Our American flag represents an American idea. This American idea is what many of our ancestors have fought bravely for and died. Having experienced combat myself, there is no better feeling than seeing an American flag blowing in the wind proudly after you've defended her. I come from a proud military heritage. My family's military history, it started with my great-great-great-grandfather who was killed in action fighting for the Union Army. My grandfather was Sergeant Watson Wright Slider, and he was from Unadilla. He was killed at the Cox Plantation in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, fighting the Confederate Army in 1864. My grandfather was 38 years old. Can you imagine that the tug you would have to have in order to walk from Unadilla to Norwich to enlist, as my grandfather did in 1863? That's 27 miles from where we're standing. Another one of my family members that served our country proudly was my uncle, Private Alfred DeForest. My uncle served in World War II and fought in the battle known as the Battle of the Bulge. During this bloody battle, there were some 80,000 military members that were killed or wounded during 45 days of fighting. The Battle of the Bulge was the second bloodiest battle in American history. Although my uncle was not killed in this battle, part of him was lost. This vicious battle, it had a serious effect on him for the remainder of his life. After Al came home from war, he was never the same. At times, it was almost like the lights were on, but nobody was home. They didn't have a name for PTSD back then. It wasn't until recent years that most people thought that you had a weak mind if you let things mentally affect you because of what you saw or experienced in combat. I'm so glad times have changed. A true testament that war is hell. I've had other family members that have served this great nation, but none that I am prouder of than our son, Army First Lieutenant Gunner Sheldon. Does my wife and I worry that someday our son might be deployed in harm's way? As parents, of course we are. As a retired Sergeant Major, I am comforted knowing that Gunner has soldiers in his unit that will look out for his welfare, just like the veterans I see standing in front of me today. You protected the members of your units whom you considered your brothers and sisters. That bond that veterans hold with those veterans that we have served with, it's a hard thing to explain. And unless you've experienced it as a veteran, you'll probably never understand it. Please pray for our veterans. Please honor our veterans as they deserve to be honored. God bless our veterans standing out here today and those that are spread across our great nation. Our veterans took a pledge to protect America, to protect those that were not strong enough to protect themselves. Because of our veterans, we were able to sleep comfortably each night, knowing our servicemen and servicewomen were ready to visit violence on those who were ready to harm our nation. We must expect the unexpected. We can't be asleep at the wheel. If it doesn't look right, chances are it isn't. Report it. Our children and grandchildren's safety depends on it. Remember, these evil terrorists, they rarely attack people where there might be a sheepdog guarding the flock. Each of us has two choices. We can either be a sheepdog or we can be part of the flock. I'll let you guess which choice I'll make. I'll be keeping my rifle clean and my powder dry. Thank you for attending today and supporting our veterans.